Meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shop at C70. We've got another little coach's corner with Alan Medlock at the end of the show as we get ready. In fact, Alan's season started today, and I'm hopefully it went off on a good note. But filling in on that side of the podcast virtual studio is the man that puts the pro in prospects, the man, the life of the party, and the reason the cops are called. It's Kyle Reis. How you doing, Kyle?
I liked it better last time when I was a special someone.
Yes, and then remember what I told you. That special has a lot of different definitions. So
hence the cops being called.
Exactly. How you doing? Is life treating you well?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Busy, we were just talking about it off air, but this is the busiest time of year really for both of us. And yeah, other than that, other than being busy and having about a quarter of the free time that I would like to have to write about prospects, I'm having the time of my life, Daniel. What about you?
Doing well. It's always a joy to have you around. And we talk a lot about good stuff, and we're going to talk about the Cardinals too. But we might talk about Bad Batch at the end. I don't know.
Yes,
that might be what keeps everybody around. Cardinals have started spring training. We've seen some games. And I know you're working during the day. You don't get a chance to see. I don't get a chance to see as much. That's the downside of spring training games a lot. But this time of spring training is probably your time of spring training, right? Because we see a lot of these guys that we're not going to see, until, here and the cuts start coming and these guys start going. But right now, there's some interesting names out there.
Yeah, I think this year is very unique. I don't think there's as many of like the prospects. I there really haven't been, right? Like that's been one of the positives, I guess, or negatives from my perspective, but positives with a lot of the free agent relief pitchers that the Cardinals have brought in. There's a very limited amount that can make the roster, and I feel like every time I'm looking at the box score, you're seeing a lot of those, Robertson, Fernandez, O'Brien. You're seeing a lot of those pitchers, Granted, we haven't got to watch Cooper Jerpy pitch yet. He's pitched a little bit. Hens has pitched a little bit. But other than that, it seems like the guys who are playing in games are the older players that the Cardinals have brought in from the free agent market, signed to minor league deals or added to the 40, or these relief pitchers that are right on the cusp. So for me, it's actually been watching the box score and watching the games here and there. It's been interesting because it hasn't been as many of our, traditional prospects. Jimmy Crooks gets an at bat here and there, and of course Thomas DeJacy and Victor Scott II are getting a little bit more intense of a look early on. But aside from that, it's really the what's been to me when I'm looking at the box score and looking at the games. It's really the bullpen competition that has been on showcase so far early on in spring.
Yeah, which it needs to be, right? I mean, there's so many different arms and so many people that could be pitching. I guess you're right. I hadn't really thought about it like that. I did see your comment toward Derek Gould today about how it's been a much more deliberate camp. And when you put it that way, I can understand what you're saying, because you're right. You're not seeing an Ian Bedell pitch right now. You're seeing, I guess the farthest down you're getting is Michael McGreevy, which is probably, even though he's wearing the number 70 now,
yes,
just to annoy me, I think, to some degree, given how he's similar to Dakota Hudson. But it does. I mean, the odds of Michael McGreevy making this team, especially right out of spring, are really, really long, right? I mean, that's just not going to happen. But these players like him, Graceffo, and others that are possibilities for later on in the year, instead of guys that we're not going to see until 2025, 2026.
Yeah, exactly. The innings that McGreevy and Kloffenstein and Robersa and Graceffo. I think Graceffo is a little bit more of a wild card in all this because you just never really know what's going to happen with a pitcher like that. There's a small world chance where he could break with the big league club, although I think there's too much relief depth for that. But yeah, I just think that those guys, while they are getting a little bit of a taste, it doesn't seem like it has in the past where it's a showcase. It's just like, all right, we're evaluating the depth at the minor league level early on so that we can get down to business later. And, the lowest down is probably Tink and Tekoa Roby. And, Roby had his start scratch because of the back soreness. So it does. It just feels like a whole different thing at camp. The reason I guess when I asked Mr. Gould about like the pace, the deliberate pace of spring, is because I had heard some rumblings that it was, and this is part of why I've been a little bit defensive about the Cardinals like evaluating their early success, is that it was very much designed to like be a slow burn spring training, which is going to annoy the piss out of people. Pardon me, it's going to annoy people a great deal. But it's not the worst thing that nothing's happened so far. They haven't really given a good spring showing. We're just getting into March right now, but I wanted to make sure that what I had been hearing was correct, and it seems like the pacing and the deliberate nature of that pace is very much planned by everybody in the Cardinals organization.
I would say obviously everybody is is in part of that decision making from Ollie and Mo and everybody else. But if you were to guess, where would you say it's most like? Who came up with the idea first? Maybe where's the impetus from that? Do you think that is an Ollie thing, or is it from the front office?
It seems like a brain trust kind of thing. I mean,
Mhm.
when I say that, I think Ollie's part of the brain trust too. I think sometimes we say immediately that it's the front office, and some of like the accounting nerds that are up there but are pencil pushers. No, I think that Ollie's involved in the conversation, but I think when you talk about bringing in a bunch of veterans for veteran leadership, I think that in itself lends itself to a deliberate nature in preparation. And I bet that this offseason plan was geared in part by the front office and in part by the coaching staff, with the suggestions of the town elders within the clubhouse.
Yeah, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah.
I feel right at home with this team, but and we added a new one this week in Brandon Crawford, which seemed a little bit surprising to me, just because. Look, I'm not saying that Jose Fermin or Buddy Kennedy is like world beaters or anything like that, but it still seemed to me like, one, you pick up Buddy Kennedy in the offseason, what are you expecting him to be? Why are you putting him on the 40 man if the first opportunity you just cut him? And second, is this a situation where, again, veteran leadership pulled its trump card? Is it a situation where Tommy Edman's going to be out longer than we think and they didn't want to ride these guys? Or is it just, hey, let's get this name in here because that's what we do now?
It seems like there's been speculation for a while now that the Cardinals were trying to feel out the middle infield depth, the shortstop depth, right? Because especially these last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot about Nick Ahmed. It seems like more than just noise. It seems like there was actually some leverage behind it. So I do think that they were probably trying to build a little bit of shortstop depth, but what they had in Brendan Crawford is the exact thing that they've acquired and built upon this offseason. He's just everything. Older, yes. Veteran, yes. All-star, yes. Really bad last year, absolutely bring him on. Like it's he checks all of those boxes. It does make me wonder about Tommy Edman. I think it's a pretty telling sign. I think that tells us that they had no idea really how bad Tommy Edman was. And I mean, obviously at winter warm up, it was a point of conversation that, Mo, how come the reporters, the journos asked Mo, how come you didn't tell us about Tommy Edman? And he did this really cute little bit That was fun to watch, where he opened up his he had a folder and he opened it up and he pretended to go over it line by line in his mind. He didn't say anything out loud. And he's like, no, I don't think there's any other business that I have to say. I hope I didn't forget anything. And which of course is condescending, but
Of
in
course.
the absolute best way for a spectator like myself who is not a real person. And but it also tells me that they probably got to camp, got eyes on Tommy, and thought, well, we need to protect ourselves. And there it is. There's your answer. Brandon Crawford. He checks all those boxes that they've been in pursuit of all offseason. And, looks like Brendan Donovan and Alec Burleson's baby.
Which is something. I don't know what that
It
means,
is.
but that is something. So, and I've talked about this a couple times in this winter with others, so we'll get your opinion on it too. It still feels like, and this is just another example, like I said, it kind of fits in this pattern of making sure there's nothing long term with this team. I mean, you're going to have your walkers, you're going to have your wins and people like that, but there's a lot of people that won't be here next year or the year after, right? I mean, this is a chance. This feels a bit like a transition type of spot, and it's also going to coincide with Mo leaving. Is that tied together?
Well, yeah. Mo seems like the kind of person. All kidding aside about John Mozeliak, he seems like the kind of person that would take on as much responsibility as possible and wouldn't want to leave anybody else with any responsibility. Like shucking responsibility. And I think you don't have to look any further than the role that Michael Gersh has taken on
Right.
since taking over the general manager job. We know that Michael Gersh does a great deal behind the scenes, and it's a fun talking point for us all to beat up on him because he's behind the scenes. But he definitely did not end up serving the role that a general manager was supposed to when Mo first envisioned taking over president of baseball operations. So I do think when you look at that, and maybe not in the altruistic way that it might sound like I'm portraying it as, but I do think that he is trying to make it so whoever takes over for him has the potential to have as clean of a slate with a little bit of dry powder to work with as much dry powder to work with if he does end up stepping down. But I also don't know if I believe he's going to step down. That's the kind of thing that can go year to year depending on the situation. And he's also been very careful about putting himself in a position where if things go well, that they can continue on the next season. Which of course is nothing from my own personal belief that going year to year or 2 year to 2 year with pitching is actually smarter than going long term with pitching, even if it is 35, 36, 37-year-old arms. Because I mean, I would love somebody to do a study on this, but I would love to know how many of the 5-man rotation around the league in 2024 are the same as it was in 2021 and then 2022 and then 2023 because arms are so delicate. I think there's actually a financial advantage and a competitive advantage, although it's more of a taxing off season to go into a year trying to add starting pitching, because then you can get hot and you don't have to, you can find a hot arm or the right arm and capitalize on it. So again, that's a tangent getting away from your question, but I do think that all coincides. I think it all plays together, but I also think that is also assuming the worst of what's going to happen. And the worst might happen, but it ignores what could happen, which is, Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson are league average pitchers. And then throughout the year, the Cardinals get to the playoffs and their options get picked up for next year. And then at that point, what developments happen with the pitchers behind them? What kind of health are the what I refer to as the big three? No disrespect to Gordon Graceffo, but hence Roby and Jerpy. What kind of health do they have? Where are they at? So I do think that as much as it was about Mo putting the timetable along with when he might step aside, I also think it buys the organization a year to get to where they thought they would be last year.
So do you, and maybe this is getting a little closer to the prospect talk, but do you think they can get there in a year from what they've got?
Again, not to put too much pressure on 3 prospects, but it comes down to Tekoa Roby, Cooper Jerpy, and Tink Hence. It's just that simple, because if all of them, reach their attainable potential, not their maximized potential, because all three of them have top of the line, top of the rotation starter potential. They're attainable, like the realistic attainable is, threes, fours, uh, that show glimpses of being twos. Because I think sometimes when we look at stats and we talk about pitchers, we step back and we're like, oh, he's a three, he's a four. But we ignore, and just like with hitters, like we ignore that there are moments within a season, there are moments within the timeline that actually help define what a pitcher is. Like Jaime Garcia was never there. There were times when statistically throughout the year he was a two, and there was times during the season when he was a potential ace. But for the most part, he was kind of a three, kind of a four. But he showed signs, and I think we ignore that sometimes when we talk about pitching and like what a pitcher is characterized as. So I think that all three of these guys can be that Jaime Garcia type, where every once in a while they're going to have a start where you're like, boom, that is a number one. And then most of the time they're probably going to be a number three, and then maybe have some two moments, maybe have some four moments, a five moment here and there. But it really comes down to those three, because I just don't know exactly what's going to happen with Gordon Graceffo. Really the second tier of that is Graceffo and Ian Bedell. And then, you go a little further down and there's a whole story, but it's really those 3 to 5 prospects that will define the success, or that will define what steps the Cardinals have to take in 2025. Really, those 3 to 5, and then of course Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson.
Yeah, and I think maybe the way I'm hearing what you're saying there, and I think is a good thing, is it's less about 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. These guys are going to hopefully be guys that can give you a chance to win every night. And if you've got that, you'd love to have the guys that are going to win every night, or that are just going to dominate. But if you can get people to go out there and you feel good about your chances, then that's better than it was last year, right? I mean, and that's the kind of thing that I think, with the volatility of pitching that's out there, that's kind of the best you can hope for. If you've got 5 guys in your rotation that you feel pretty good about every time they go out there, you're probably doing all right.
Yeah. And you have to assume too, really, Daniel, that is really the baseline with all of this. And it's frustrating to Cardinal fans. It's frustrating to me, but that's definitely the stance that the Cardinals have taken. If you can just get there, if you can just give your team a chance to win, if you have starting pitchers who can give your hitters a chance to win, the defense behind them a chance to win, then you're going to win a lot of games if you have the talent, the offensive talent, and the position player talent that the Cardinals have. That's a position that they've taken, and hopefully that's what these 3 to 5 in particular end up being. So yeah, I think that's a perfect baseline, Daniel.
Let's talk about some guys that are not on your list anymore, because they have been in your list in the past, but now are established, at least somewhat, major leaguers. And that's a lot of these guys, right? A lot of the hitters are guys that you've watched a long, long time. I mean, obviously you were talking Brendan Donovan, I think, before anybody was. You've seen Gorman, you've seen Walker, you've seen Wynn, all of these kind of things. Is there anybody that has gotten to the major leagues and surprised you once they were there? Or has this kind of been the development you thought you would see?
I feel it's, my brain is mush, Daniel.
Well, yeah.
That's why I have trouble finding the first word of every sentence I'm saying tonight, because my brain is melted through the eyeballs, I think. But no, I think there's been plenty of prospects that I've been wrong about, right? Like, I think I've always been pretty candid about saying I have trouble evaluating catchers. I thought Carson Kelly would be better than what he was. I thought Andrew Kisner would be better than what Kiz was. But both of them have had, in different ways, even though if you're talking about a WAR value level, they both had pretty solid careers. I just thought both of them would be a little bit more for a little bit longer. As far as like who's on the Cardinal roster now, I was always, and I think you can attest to this, both Thompson and Liberatore, I was somewhat skeptical of both of them for various different reasons. Never enough where I would push either too far down the prospect list. I've tried to learn that with Michael McGreevy, and kind of stuck with my instincts on him because of that. I still think at this point, I think Zach Thompson, I think, is going to get plenty of innings as a starter because I don't think all 5 of these guys are going to be healthy for very long, which probably isn't a fair speculation point. But I definitely think that we'll see Zach Thompson because he's the better of the 2 options between him and Liberatore. So I do think we'll see Zach Thompson getting starting innings, which 2 years ago, I'm not sure if I would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I end up being bullish about some relief pitchers here and there that I've missed on. I really thought if Nick Plummer, I still believe that if the circumstances would have been a little bit different for Nick Plummer and he would have been given like a real chance, like a Richie Palacio type chance with the
Mm-hmm.
Cardinals, I think that he would have had Richie Palacios like results. But his whole, getting taken off of the roster or not getting tendered a contract and signing a major league deal with the Mets and then going through roster instability. Like I just would have thought that he would have been a little bit more of a 4th, 5th, a swingman type outfielder. Just thinking about some of the names that I've been wrong about, and there are plenty more. Juan Yepes, I'll maintain until the day I die because his entire body change and his entire approach change that Albert Pujols was the worst thing that happened to Juan Yepes. It like changed his complete mind frame. I thought for sure he'd be major league DH at the very least, and he still might have that. Maybe getting into the Nationals would be good for him. But those are just a couple of the names that come to my mind that I was wrong about, as far as like who I thought might be better than what they turned out to be.
We've heard the talking point, and I know you've talked about it before too, about how Mason Wynn struggles when he gets to a level, and then he finds that second gear, he makes the adjustments and goes forward. And I'm very, very excited about Mason Wynn. Do you think that's going to hold true here? I mean, that he may still struggle a little bit this year, but eventually he's going to find that level that he's going to be successful at.
Yeah, especially as we get into spring. And, other than his family, I'm the biggest Mason Wynn fan on earth. But if you'll remember, Mason Wynn was better in spring last year than Jordan Walker was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He was way more impressive. And so I like to use that as kind of a reminder of how we start to gauge spring production. I think it's reasonable to expect that because of how much more difficult the major leagues is than any of the levels of the minor league and transitioning from any level to another level at the minor leagues, I think it's reasonable to expect that he's still going to struggle. But the advantage that he has is the off season and his ability to learn and apply. And I think that's one of the things that probably gets overlooked a little bit with Mason because he's such an athlete and he's got some flashy tools. It's sometimes we say adapt, but what he does is he learns and applies. And I think that I'm going to try to make a better point to differentiate the two moving forward where I can, because adapting is awesome. It's a great trait to have, adapting to a new level and adapting to the major leagues. But I don't know if adapting is as stable as learning and applying. And Mason is a learner that applies. And, at the same time that I do believe he'll struggle a little bit, I would not be surprised if he comes out of spring training absolutely on fire and, has 5 home runs in the first 2 months of the season, before maybe hitting a rough patch here and there as the league starts to adjust to him and having success. I know that if he's committed to being a 15-15 guy without, compromising his slash line, I would not bet against him one bit. But I do think it's fair. I think it'd be in everybody's best interest that if he is hitting, 200, 230, 230 as we get out of April, to just not care, even if the Cardinals offense is bad, as long as he's playing the solid, flashing, elite type defense that he's capable of.
Yeah, I don't want to see what they did with Jordan Walker last year, right? I mean, to let him play for a few weeks and then to send him back down, in part because a little bit of that is blaming for the team struggles, but yeah, and I got to say, I really love the fact that we heard this week that he's telling the pitchers that he could take their job at any time.
Yes,
that is great, and it's that kind of confidence that we just really like to see.
Yeah, he's a completely unique person, and that's another thing. Like, you know, that's another thing that makes him special is he's a unique person. He talks a different way than everybody else. He's candid in a way that no one else is on the roster. He doesn't give canned responses. They're very natural, very organic, whatever exactly that word means. I don't know. I'm very processed, so
I don't know. It costs
it's
a lot more when you talk to him. I think it's what it means.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, he's got his own special section of the grocery store.
That's right.
And he's his own unique person. And there's a whole rant that I'm going on in my head right now about the some of the comments that Arnano made about the clubhouse being young
Mm-hmm.
that I haven't had a chance to like get out, that I'm going to spare you of. But the short of the long is I would rather have Mason win. I would rather have people feeding off of Mason Wynn's energy than Nolan Arenado's.
Yeah.
The short of the long is that. So if the way that those kids are playing was an issue for Arenado, then Arenado's the issue. That's all I wanted to say. I love Nolan Arenado. That's it.
Yeah, and I will say it seems to be. I mean, and again, I don't know where I've seen this, and it may be just people, interpreting that don't necessarily know either. But it also seemed like it was. Well, is it? Oh, well, I guess it was Nolan that was talking about them being on their phones and things of that nature, which I get, right? I mean, that's a different. There is a generation gap to some degree here. When Nolan came up, it was play the game and you're a team, all that stuff. And hopefully that some of that is worked out anyway. There's got to be some meshing of cultures there, right? I mean, because the old school isn't completely right, but they do have they've done it before, so there is something there that the young guys can take. And like you said, Mason's learning, and I'm sure he'll learn from that too. Hopefully, he won't learn the canned answers and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I think this is going to be it's going to be fascinating in the clubhouse. I mean, because there is all this veteran leadership, but you're right. These kids got to have some excitement because we've talked about it before, how having Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn, and then hopefully, sometime soon in the next year or two, Victor Scott the second, that's more personality than like the whole 2000s Cardinals put together, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair without really knowing what it's like inside of the clubhouse intimately. I think that's probably a fair thing to say for sure. Yeah. I would love to be a fly on the wall and see what it's like in there.
Yeah. It would be interesting. And again, we've also said winning fixes a lot of things, right? It's a lot easier especially for a guy like Nolan, who is so intense. I mean, that just bleeds off the screen when you watch, to be losing. And, if somebody's not apparently feeling the loss as much as he does, I can see how it would rankle a little bit. It's like, why don't you care as much? And it's like, dude, we're 30 games out. We can only do so much.
Yeah. It would be a tough environment. It's a tough learning environment at that point, right?
Yeah.
Not even a matter of like a tough winning losing environment or work environment. Like it'd be a tough environment to learn how to be a pro in, my own opinion, at least.
Yeah. Which, I mean, again, when they made the argument about bringing in Matt Carpenter, there was some logic there, right? I mean, I didn't think it was really necessary, but the idea that, hey, this guy is going to be able to work with these young guys, to show them the ropes, to do all this stuff, because he's not going to have to worry about prepping for today's game because he's not going to play. And that, I get that. I didn't know that we needed 2 or 3 of these guys. And I wonder if Mo sometimes realizes that leadership is an intangible, and so it doesn't actually literally show up in the box score. We don't win a whole bunch of games because you got a whole bunch of old guys.
And also who decides who the leader is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're the person doesn't decide that they're a leader, the people around them decides who the leader is.
Right.
Like some people, leadership can be taught, it can be learned, it's almost certainly earned specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you're trying to bring on people to be leaders is a forced situation by nature.
Right.
Leaders are born
Mm-hmm.
from circumstance. And I think the whole idea of bringing on leaders is really just Mo's, and we've all talked about it at this point. I'm just regurgitating what
Mhm.
everyone else is saying, but this is Mo's way of saying, well, you're fresh out of excuses, Nolan, go do it.
Yeah. And there's something to that too, right? I mean, it's like, okay, we're going to give you all the tools that you think you need, but but that means when at the end of the year, if it's not working, then we can say, well, that didn't work and move a different direction. And there's not a whole lot you can say about it. Right? And I don't, and that comes across as more adversarial than I know that the front office is with Nolan, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're not trying to say put up or shut up or anything like that. But, you know, again, if they get to the end of the year and it's been an off year, then they're going to have to start saying, hey, look, what, and then it's probably is start get the brooms out because we're going to have to start cleaning out.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating season. And
Mhm.
again, very generic terms, but I think not only for the fan base, but I think not only for the fan or not for the team, but for the fan base. I think specifically for the fan base, it's going to be fascinating. Just we've never been in this position,
Mhm.
since we've been this connected as a society, we've never been in this position, and it's already miserable. So I cannot wait to see how it goes, even if it goes well, because I think even coming off of a bad season, anything short of like sky high expectations is a failure still, which kind of blows my mind. But I get it, because now we're probably more hunger starved for success than we've been in a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, there's that pressure, right? You can't have two of these years in a row. So then you feel that pressure. And then of course you start the years out in the West Coast with the Dodgers and the Padres. And, again, you don't write off a season after a week. I'm not even all saying that, but if you get back to Bush and you're what, 2-5, which is legitimate. I mean, that's a tough trip. You know, how are you feeling as a player? Are you feeling like, man, here we go again, or we got to get out of this hole and start pressing, or do you just let it go? I don't know. I'll see how it goes. I guess. Hopefully, we don't have to worry about it. Hopefully, they have a good start, and then the pressure just kind of evaporates.
At the very least, if they do go, 2 and 5 or whatever, and they can't turn the season around, we'll know just how BS filled the whole talk about leadership was. Like that's, and again, there's nothing I want more than for them to blow the West Coast apart when they get to the West Coast to start the year. But there, it would be really nice to put this whole leadership thing to bed right away.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, yeah. Hopefully, it's not a overwhelming issue. I mean, everybody's going to be talking leadership, especially every time Matt Carpenter strikes out or something like that.
Yeah.
But hopefully, it's more of an internet meme than an actual discussion point um, going forward. We'll have
Yeah.
to wait and see.
I mean, I said all this stuff about leadership and age, but you're old as dirt, and you're basically our leader. So
Yeah, yeah, that is pretty much how it works. I keep trying to not lead you, and people keep following me. So,
I'm like a little duckling.
let's shift gears then. Let's do what you do best, besides create chaos. You've put out I guess the dirty 50, and probably the dirtiest version I've ever actually seen of this list. A screenshot of your lined notebook paper with the 35 ranked and the next 15 listed. Um, Talk about this process for you a little bit, because
Oh
you've done
God.
this now, and you're giving me grief for being old, and that's fair. But you've done this
Yeah.
for a while now, and you've seen, basically generate. I mean, we were talking about Carson Kelly. Carson Kelly's about to start his ninth year in the major leagues, and you
Wow.
saw him,
Jesus.
pretty much, I think, from when he was drafted. So you've been doing this quite some time. How has this changed for you? Is this have you because I know at one time you had good connections with a lot of the families. Do you still have that, or have you pushed away from that a little bit more? Have you changed your process any, or is this still just kind of a better way of what you were doing early on?
Daniel, I have gray in my beard. It's happened.
Join the club. I think I think I have a little not gray in mind, but that's another story.
Oh, all of the things that you said, I would say are still happening. Maybe a little less frequently as far as like player and family involvement. I've kind of been a little bit more guarded about like accepting DMs and answering DMs that I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess my whole outlook on all of this has changed quite a bit, and maybe just the last year or so. It's really hard to say, and it's really hard to articulate. But I no longer am interested in being a conduit for anything, and I don't know if I ever was particularly interested in being a conduit for unnamed anything, unspecified anything. But now I'm interested in being not interested in doing it, and sometimes it's all about the process, Daniel.
Mm.
So I, in a very vague and a very cryptic, somewhat way, like I really just want to gif baseball when I can and talk about baseball as frequently as possible because it's my favorite thing to do, really. Um, other than give you grief for how old you are, and then give me grief for how old I am. But no, like, so yeah. And as far as the process goes, like, my process is basically the same. The difference is now there's just so many numbers.
Yeah.
There is a drowning amount of numbers. A couple months ago, I tweeted, and of course, I mean it just like I mean everything else. It's like a 65 to 75% joke and a 25 to whatever the other percentage is percent joke. Where it's like I think I'm too stupid for this day and age. I don't know if I'm smart enough for baseball these days because I just don't think that I understand all of what's going on anymore.
Mm.
So I would say that the biggest change is that there's all this extra information that I have to incorporate in that makes me doubt my initial appraisal, which is another issue that I face when I get to start writing because I probably have had time to write a little bit here and there about the prospect. Pardon me, about the prospects. But the issue is I start writing and I'm like, oh wait, I've got to go back and look at the numbers, and which is good, and that'll create an informed viewer, an informed reader, an informed listener. But I'm also incredibly bored by the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
which you know it makes it hard for me to write about because I'm bored about it. But they need that information, So it's I would say that that's the biggest change, and also like now I guess because again, like I guess I'm communicating with different people who have information here and there. I'm trying to keep that as far away as possible, more so now than ever. Uh, uh, Back to like when I first started evaluating prospects, because when I first started evaluating prospects, it was because of every outlet. We've talked about it 100 times, and I felt like I wanted to give everybody a fair shake. I wanted to try to give as much real, tangible information that was unbiased as possible. Uh, and I feel like now I'm talking to so many different people about so many different things. People not affiliated with the Cardinals, affiliated with other organizations about their prospects and prospects in the Cardinals organization, and like not saying anything about the Cardinals prospects, just trying to get like a general idea. And like I'm not. I would like for that to stop. I would like to not have that happen. I would like to be as solo as possible and fade off into the distance is what I would like, slumped over on a horse, preferably. Again, I'm rambling just to say that I would say that other than the need to understand and apply data that is smarter than I am to prospect evaluations, my process has stayed the same. That list of 50 prospects, I probably went through between 10 and 20 different versions of that, working on it over maybe a 2-week time period whenever I had free time, and then just kind of like blowing it up a couple different times completely and starting over. And the information I use are some notes I jot down and some of the gifts I go back and look at and some of the games I go back and rewatch. And that's all stayed the same. I don't take as many notes anymore because I'm gifting every game every night that I can. Where I used to not ever gif, I used to just watch 3 games and write notes. So I don't really have that capacity anymore. But yeah, other than that, like that's the process is the same. Just the knowledge and the numbers and understanding it all is really what's changed.
Yeah, you're a great jiffer. So
Oh
there.
no. Let me tell you what's funny is I'm in the kitchen and I noticed that there was a little piece of peanut butter hanging off the KitchenAid mixer. Right as you said that, and I'm sure it's like 3 months old at this point, but it did not stop me from putting it in my mouth.
Of course not. Of course not. So again, we will get to the prospects, but I do. It is different for you now because I mean you've created this following whether you like it or not, um, but you're also not the only one anymore, right? I mean, there's Blake, there's
Yeah.
Kareem, there's people I'm not thinking of right now, but there's a lot of guys doing what you do. Again, I don't want to say we don't want you going anywhere at all. But if for some reason you did feel like you wanted to pack it up, prospect appreciation and prospect knowledge is in such a different place, in part because of you, and it's what people have been able to take away from what you've done and then bring it on into learning some of those numbers and doing something with them that maybe you don't.
Yeah, they rock too. Specifically Kareem and Blake Newberry. Like the only reason I started doing this is because I just wanted the prospects to get a fair shake. That was it. I
Mhm.
didn't want, I was tired of hearing people say, uh, Harrison Bader was going to be MVP Matt Kemp, and like I hated that. It drove me nuts. And then when, before these kids would make their debut, and no one had ever seen them because no one was putting minor league video up. People had these unreal expectations of, rest in peace Oscar Tavares.
Yeah.
He just the Cardinals aided it and the national media aided it, but he was never going like he was a special talent and a special bat that was already on a hobbled leg. He was going to have trouble to breach that expectation. It just, it's a terrible thing to talk about now that he's passed, but like that, it wasn't just him. It was all of these players. And then I fed into it with Dylan Carlson, although I didn't realize I was doing it. I was trying to compare him to Nick Markakis, which still hasn't happened and still might happen. But like even then try to bring it back. So to see Kareem and to see Blake in particular, because to me, Kareem is awesome. He's getting there. Blake is as good as you're going to find with Cardinal prospects anywhere, hands down. It's not even debatable. What they're doing is the whole reason why I started doing it in the first place, from my vantage point, is they're giving the prospects a fair shake. They're providing you with the information, and they're not telling you anything, any way to feel, any way to think. They're not playing that game. They're just saying, look, here's the information. This is what we see. These are my thoughts. This is what I'm seeing. And I could be wrong. And there's a chance that by the time you're reading this pitcher's already made the adjustment and he's made me wrong, even if I was right. And the contextual provided information brought forth for your own judgment has been awesome to see them, what I would say, continue to provide and to do it better than I do. And that's not to not to diminish myself. It's just to be very honest that they're better at that than I am. And that is all for the better. And I love that. And this is what I've always wanted. This is the whole purpose of why I started all of this. And again, that's probably at the same time taking way too much credit, but that I don't have to do it anymore. That I don't feel that responsibility. Making myself putting myself on a pedestal. I don't have to feel that responsibility anymore to continue to provide that for people because they're not getting it just from me. They're getting it from multiple outlets, is reliable outlets, independent from the Cardinals. It is really fantastic. So it's awesome to see. Like I don't get to read everything. I don't see everything to even be able to read it. But when I see Blake has put something out, when I see Kareem has put something out, Blake's put out quite a bit. I'm reading it. I will bookmark it. I will email it to myself, and I will read it because he is incredible, and that is so cool because he's such a great person too.
Yeah, it's amazing, and so let's look at these guys. I don't, again, as much as I know how much you want to go over every single one of these people
Mm-hmm.
line by line. We just don't have the time for that, unfortunately. So let's let's break it down into groups and let's talk about. And I'm not going to read them, and partly because I will butcher some names, and that I leave to you. But out of the 15 that you kind of have right off the list, and I don't know if those are actually, you don't have numbers, so I assume they're kind of like just a kind of a clump. They're not necessarily ranked. Who do you think is most likely to be in your top 35, maybe even by mid-season?
Yeah, all of the all because of the data available, the first name that everyone's going to say is William Sullivan,
Mhm.
8th round pick, first baseman. He's a big wait, no, not 8th round, 12th round. My bad. William Sullivan, 6'4", lean. He kind of, first baseman, kind of left-handed swinging. Kind of has a little bit of Lars Nootbaar in his swing, but he's a little bit more handsy. He has, at Palm Beach last year, he had all of the data that you want to see. Good swing decisions, some of the best hard hit data. Um, you know, an acceptable strikeout rate for the walk rate he's putting up and the power he's providing. I immediately had somebody criticize me for not putting him on the initial 35, and to be 100% honest, that is completely warranted. I just see him as a 22-year-old for the most part at Palm Beach with still some concerns in his swing. And I want to see him more. I didn't get to see him a lot at Palm Beach. And I didn't get to see him a lot in college. There weren't a whole lot of games that I could really go back and access, not like with Chase Davis.
Mm.
So it was a matter of just like, I want to see more of this guy. And I'm going to be a little bit more critical of the data of someone like this, who his entire profile has been hitting the ball hard, and in low A, you can really take advantage of that league if you're jumping the right pitch. Uh, he did it exceedingly well, but I just want to see what it's like when he goes to Peoria. And then I would say of the pitchers, just to kind of like differentiate one hitter, one pitcher. And I love Alex Iadacernia. I absolutely love Alex Iadacernia, an outfielder. I think he's kind of one of the more underrated prospects in the organization. Um, I would say that Jacob Odell, a deep round pick in last year's draft, he's got all the stuff in the world, measurables. He can't command the pitch, any of it really. It's actually painful for me to watch him pitch, kind of like it was with Edwin Nunez a couple years ago. I think those two, if you're going to pick a pitcher and you're going to pick a hitter, those are probably the two that not only could be in the top 35 next year, because I think technically all of these guys could probably be in the top 35 next year, except for Koperniak and Redmond, because we'll see what happens with their careers. I think that they're the ones who could potentially even be in the top 25 or 20.
Well, it sounds like Jacob has odals of possibilities.
Oh, God, no. Oh,
And
my
but
God.
with
You know what? I'm
Sullivan,
taking him off the list. I'm taking him off the
but with
list.
Sullivan, it's just will he make it or will he won't?
Oh, my God. I'm taking him off the list, too.
I
As a matter
wanted
of fact,
I wanted to
they're
do
all off the
one.
list.
I was going to say I wanted to do one for everybody, but I didn't. So
They're all off the list.
I knew you couldn't get it, couldn't resist it. So okay, yeah, and those are some fascinating names. I know you've got Ryan Fernandez on there. Of course, that's going to be kind of dependent on the 25 man or the Rule 5 draft. But it's interesting to see that they got somebody that's at least in the conversation in that Rule 5. So
Yeah.
that's fun.
And it's worth noting with him too, that's a lot of other outlets do have him in the Cardinals top 30. I don't, it's the same kind of thing. I don't know if his fastball's there. If you want to get into that, I don't think he's going to make the 26. And I think that the Cardinals are going to have a decision on their hands with that. But that doesn't mean he's not a talented pitcher worth mentioning as a top prospect in the organization.
I think that is going to be interesting. I mean, there are options. They could trade to Boston for the show for his rights and be able to demote him or whatever the case may be. We've also seen that just this week that just because they grab somebody this winter doesn't mean that they're going to keep him around. So, but I mean they also had him closing out the game today, right? Not that it means a lot at this time of year, but it is always interesting to see how these guys are used and where they put them into maybe pressure type of situations.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. All right, let's look at 25 to 35 here, or 26, I guess, to 35 at the end of the roster. Who stands out for you here?
I'll tell you who stands out for me if you try to pronounce prospect number 35's first name.
Ian.
Oh, that's actually That's actually better than I would have thought. So it's Eshawn,
Eshawn.
E
Yeah.
yeah, Ixan Henderson, Eshawn Henderson.
I just figured the X was silent. So yeah.
It might as well be, right? Well, I'm sure he's got a Twitter account. I'll DM and tell him he's Ian from now on.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
Uh,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's in this group. So what are we 26 through 35? Is that
Yeah.
kind of where we're at?
Yeah.
It's an interesting group because it's all over the place.
Hmm.
26 is Inohan Paniagua, who there was some speculation he might get taken in the Rule 5. That was never going to happen, but he's got a big curveball and he can flash a little bit of velocity and kind of a good budding changeup. I wouldn't call maybe an average pitch. Flash is average, probably below average. It can be a really, really good pitch, especially against lefties. I don't know where he's going to start. I would hope that they bust him up to Springfield a little bit, but there's a chance he goes back to Peoria as a 23, 24-year-old. That puts him well below the curve. I like Inohan, and it's quote unquote make or break type season for him and his prospect standing. 27 is Edwin Nunez, who again has all of the stuff in the world. As somebody and I apologize to the person who was in my mentions who mentioned that he has kind of a fastball shape issue. It's a little overstated. It's not like the fastball shape is not that big of a deal, in my opinion, because of how lively his arm is and the angle that the ball comes out of. But what he has are some really flashy breaking and off speed pitches, but he lacks control. So if this 23-year-old who's been in the Cardinals organization now, what for? I mean, 6 or 7 years at this point. This is his 7th season in the Cardinals organization.
Yeah.
If he can make some if he can make some strides with his command of these pitches, then he could be a fast riser as a bullpen option for the Cardinals by the end of the year. It's just a matter of if he can continue to make the strides, if he can make the gains between 23 and 24 that he made between 22 and 23, then he might be knocking on that doorstep because his stuff is so good. 28, Moises Gomez. I feel like we've gone over. You and I have gone over him enough. Andre Granillo, right-handed relief pitcher, 24 years old. Big slider is really the name of his game. He's got kind of an interesting changeup and a good fastball. Matt Swanson is the prospect that the Cardinals got for Paul DeJong from the Blue Jays. Again, fast rising relief pitcher. I've got nothing to say about Mike Antico. I just put him on here because he's old and I'm trying to represent our people. Noah Mendlinger's 32. Now, Trent, I think Jonathan Mejia, prospect number 34, ways away. That's more about me correcting a mistake I made last year. I had him as a top 6. I didn't want to do it. I was trusting the national people. That's why I'm definitely trying to get myself away from that a little bit. He's prospect 34. He's still like 14 years old or 9 or something like that. So he's got plenty of time to develop. And then Eshawn Henderson, who's a lefty the Cardinals selected, who's got some nasty stuff and great pitchability. But I think in that group, prospect 32 and prospect 33, Noah Mendlinger, a utility player who's a hit tool guy, maybe not as good of a hit tool as like Nick Dunn has, but he's a better athlete. He was mostly a second baseman, but the Cardinals put him out in the outfield at Springfield last year, and he was really good out there. And he's a gamer is what he is. So he could end up being like a sneaky, quick riser. Keep an eye on Noah Mendlinger, again, utility, left-handed swinging player. And then Trent Baker, who's he's like 25 already, and he's kind of languished at Peoria last year. He definitely deserved a promotion that he never got. And I'm hopeful that the Cardinals, they've kind of shown that they like him a lot. They just didn't give him the promotion. So I'm anxious to see how aggressive they can be with him. He's got a really hard fastball and some interesting off-speed pitches to break off of it. But he can strike guys out. So I think that if you're looking at that group, Noah Mendlinger and Trent Baker and again, you never know with Swanson and Granillo and Edwin Nunez because they're relief pitchers. But I think Mendlinger and Trent Baker are the two sleepers here. The two guys that could easily like creep into a major league debut, even if they never move like up a prospect list.
It's fascinating. You were talking about how young Mejia is, but it feels like we've heard his name. And again, this is part of prospects now, right? It used to be back in the old days, you didn't hear about anybody until they were like at least at AAA, right? And it didn't worry about it. But now guys like Mejia, we know about them when they come up, and so that gets into prospect fatigue, right? I mean, not that he's there yet, but by the time he's ready to make the majors, we might be, it's kind of a little bit with what we've seen with Ivan Herrera, right? That idea that why hasn't he made it yet? He must be a bust when he hasn't. He's still young and hasn't just had a chance yet.
Yeah, well, even exactly, it's the perfect conversation as we talked about Edwin Nunez. Edwin Nunez
Mm-hmm.
feels like he's been around forever, and he was the flashy international signing name within the Cardinals organization, just like Jonathan Mejia is. And now, at the age of, I think, entering his age 23 season, he's finally poised with the right development to either make or break his career, and that's actually pretty accurate on the timeline. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Mejia has another low visibility type season, and it's not until maybe even 25 or 26 that he has a real shot at busting out stateside. And it might not ever happen. So yes, I do think that's a great way of categorizing it, is that God, there's just everything these days is overexposed,
Yeah.
myself included.
Well, if you put a shirt on during prospects after dark, maybe we wouldn't have this problem. Um, Next 16 to 25, and before you get into really breaking them down, I do have somebody in the Discord that we have, along with the show and other Cardinal podcasts, asked this question today, and I said I'd bring it up. But you've got Pedro Pages at 22, which is a story in and of itself. But
Oh no.
he asked, what are the chances of him being a legitimate major league backup catcher?
He
Is
could have.
that where he could? Is that still? I mean, obviously he's still young, but is that reasonable?
No, I mean, he could have been a. I mean, I hate to be. Yes, the answer is yes. There is a chance. Of course, there's always a chance.
Mhm.
But like, he's the perfect guy who could have been Yachty's backup. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I think that's probably the best way to look at him. And it's tough because there are few players in the organization that are as likable, including at the major leagues, as Pedro Pages. He is he's a teammate's teammate is what he is. And he's really great at framing the pitch in that exaggerated way that annoys me to my core, but gets results. Where a pitch is like down in the dirt and he
Yeah.
brings it up to the middle of the plate and it gets called a strike somehow because he's got quick hands. He's better at that than anybody in the organization, and that's good. It steals strikes for his pitchers. I hate it, and I'm anxious to see how it works at AAA with the automated strike zone. That's going to be fascinating because there was none of that last year. He was at AA last year, so I'm anxious to see how that goes. And I think that's probably going to hurt his stock a little bit. And he has a swing that is kind of it has sneaky power. Like, he's hit some real bombs, and he has a really good opposite field gap swing, kind of meant for the opposite field gap. Even though he can turn on pitches, but and he has a good arm. But it's just like, I feel like at this point I've seen enough catchers that have made the majors and have stuck around and not stuck around and underperformed and haven't really seen much overperformance, honestly, but that have underperformed, that I feel like his skills are below, or other than the framing, I think his skills are like right on par with what we've seen out of Andrew Kisner. I think Kisner has a little bit better movement. I've seen Pedro Pages sometimes, especially with lively fastballs, the ball sneaks out of his glove. Which was one of my complaints about Wilson Contreras last year. Like, there's a little bit of that. Big breaking pitches, he struggles to corral sometimes. So yeah, like, look, with any of these guys, you don't know what an offseason is going to produce. You just don't. I have not seen Pedro Pages all that much this spring, so I can't really say. Maybe these are the areas of his game that he's really cleaned up. And in that case, then yeah, absolutely, he could be a backup. But I think more realistically, he's perfectly suited for his role now, which is minor league depth, to be that minor league depth option that the Cardinals have been paying 29 to 35-year-olds to be,
Mhm.
that never really sniffed the majors for the last decade.
I feel like I may be wrong because I've not seen very many innings this winter or this spring. But I feel like he was behind the plate in a game that I watched one day this week and missed a couple of balls down low that got away. Runner
Yeah.
got to advance and stuff like that. So I get what you're saying there, if that's true. And it may have been somebody else. I think it was him behind the plate.
Yeah, I saw it
Go
happen
ahead.
with Nick Raposo. It happened to him a couple times, and I did see it happen to Pedro Pajes twice.
Yeah. So, um, out of the rest of this group, you got a lot of guys that came over in the trade deadline last year, which I think is good in the fact that it was able to kind of replenish that depth that the Cardinals are needing. But they're also not, they didn't go out except for we'll get to Roby, but they didn't go out and get just really top of the line guys. Is there anybody out there that interests you? I mean, I know that Zach Showalter didn't get a chance to do much, but all the talk around him made him at least sound pretty intriguing.
Yeah. This group is kind of a fun group, right? Because it's a lot of wild cards in this group. Since I don't have it published anywhere, I think I might just go like do a quick rundown.
Go ahead.
Prospect 25 is Josh Baez, outfielder, second round pick. Still a big boy, still incredible power potential, still has some pretty good speed, still working on some stuff as a corner outfielder. Has a lot of trouble really jumping his pitch in the box. But he's still, again, a little bit of prospect fatigue there. He's probably still only 20, 21 years old. And, he's fallen quite a bit on the list, but he still has plenty of time to figure it out and plenty of athleticism, too. Prospect 24 is Zach Showalter, right-handed pitcher. Cardinals acquired as part of the Jack Flaherty deal last year. Funky motion, got hurt. Anxious to see what his 2024 looks like. Prospect 23 is really the interesting one in this group, and that's Chen-Wei Lin. He's a big right-hander, about 6'6", 6'7". When he's on the mound at Palm Beach, he looks like he's every bit of 7 foot tall. And he has that same thing that Johan Oviedo had when Oviedo was a teenager in the Cardinals organization. And you can tell he doesn't have the muscle mass to control his body the way somebody that size needs to control their body. And he has some command issues, but I think he's got low-key some of the filthiest stuff in the entire organization. And because he's relatively new to the organization, because he is still trying to, develop as a pitcher, he's a real wild card here. So keep an eye out for Chen-Wei Lin. 22 is Pedro Pajes. 21 is Zach Levinson. Levinson, Florida State. Big time slugger potential, really athletic outfielder. Cardinals drafted in the 2023 draft. I think maybe in a lot of ways of all of the prospects that were drafted in 2023 that made a major league debut or a minor league debut, I think he might have had the most impressive. Did some of the things that I was most impressed with. Cesar Prieto, the second baseman / third baseman / not really good fielder who makes contact with everything on earth. Player that the Cardinals got, again, as part of the Jack Flaherty deal from the O's. I don't know what to think of him. I know that he can make contact with basically everything. I know that if he can uppercut a ball, he might hit it 96 miles an hour and find its way over a fence because he gets good backspin on the ball. And I don't really know what his defensive profile is as far as, because like when I watched him at second, he seemed clunky, and at third he seemed clunky, and it seemed like he was really only going to be a second baseman. And I just don't really know how like the lack of real power is gonna play there. Again, he kind of reminds me of Max Schrock, Cardinal legend Max Schrock. And then I wanted to make a point to clump 16, 17, 18, and 19 together. 16 is Pete Hansen, the Cardinals' third-round pick last year in 2022. 17 is Quinn Matthews, the Cardinals' fourth-round pick in 2023. 18 is Adam Kloffenstein, of course, the Cardinals acquired for Jordan Hicks. And 19 is Bryson Mounts, the lefty that the Cardinals drafted in the second round of 2022. And to me, like, this group is really interesting because the most gifted from an quote-unquote arm talent standpoint is easily prospect number 19, Bryson Mounts. The least gifted is probably prospect number 18, Adam Kloffenstein. But what Kloffenstein rather does is he has 4 pitches that just are subtly different from each other. A slider, a curveball that he doesn't throw all that often enough. He needs to start throwing it more. If the Cardinals are listening, have him throw that pitch more. A fastball and a sinker, and they all kind of come from the same angle, and they all kind of move differently. He has some command issues, but if he can work through those command issues, he could be a really interesting like throwback to 1997 as a starting pitcher. And then Quinn Matthews, who is probably of the 3 lefties in this group, Hansen, Matthews, and Mounts, is probably the best combination of stuff and pitchability. It's just a matter of he's got a really taxed arm, and which is probably healthy now from the long 2023 Stanford season as their ace. Those four I wanted to make a point to kind of clump together because they're all a bit wild cards and they're all a little older, maybe even for their level, although Quinn Matthews is kind of the younger statesman in this. But I think that they're a very interesting group and filled with guys who really aren't too far away from the majors, but also guys who are quite a distance away from the majors.
Yeah, especially with some of the recent additions. So
Yeah.
All right, 15 through 6. This is the group that you're right. Your top 5. I think everybody's going to know, or at least know who they are, even if they don't know the order. These are some of the guys that are kind of starting to make a name for themselves one way or another. You want to just start at the bottom and work your way up?
Yeah, if that works for you. Yeah.
Even if it doesn't.
Prospect number 15 is Travis Honeyman. He's an outfielder, Cardinals second round pick last year. Or wait, no, hold on, I'm messing up, aren't I?
No, you're right.
Cardinals third round pick last year.
Yeah, okay.
They forfeited their second round pick
because of Contreras
for Wilson.
Yeah,
that's
their second pick last year.
That's right.
Okay.
So Travis Honeyman, outfielder. Now the deal with Honeyman is he's very athletic, but also people question his athleticism, and he's a pretty good defensive outfielder, but people question his ability to play the outfield. And he's got some really good power, but people question his ability to hit for power. And if I'm being completely honest, this is the one spot on the list where I'm compromising. I'm following the national hype on this a little bit. I'm going to trust the people who really got to watch him in college. But for me, I have a lot of questions about the type of hitter he's going to be, the type of player he's going to be. He was really great in the Cape Cod League a couple years back, kind of made a name for himself in that league. There's some people who think that he could be a top 5 prospect in the Cardinals organization. Again, we'll see. Just a player I want to see more of with a ton of promise. Prospect number 14-70 is right-handed pitcher Michael McGreevy. He's 70 because of Daniel Shoptaw. And
that's exactly why he picked that number.
Exactly. And we all know the story with McGreevy. He doesn't strike out anybody. He doesn't miss a ton of bats, but he's probably going to be a major leaguer, and he's probably going to do better than any of us are going to give him credit for at that point. Prospect 13 is Sem Robersa, and Robersa is actually somebody that I want to kind of burrow in for a second and talk about, because I think I was kind of a Sem Robersa doubter when the Cardinals traded for him. I went back and watched all but like 3 of his starts in the 2023 season prior to the acquisition. And I thought, hey, this guy isn't really good. He's got some good stuff, but you can tell it's not particularly he's just not a pitcher yet. And then the Cardinals put him at AAA, and I thought, hey, this is a really bad idea to do with the 21-year-old. But lo and behold, it ended up being a really smart thing because it forced Robersa to go on the attack. And it took him almost half of his starts with the organization to get into it. But once he started attacking with his stuff, he was incredibly, incredibly impressive. And he actually made me a believer. There's a version of this list where he's a top 10 prospect for me. I just kind of backed off because, candidly, I wanted to put him right next to Michael McGreevy and Ian Bedell because I think that they're an interesting 3-pack. So, yes, keep an eye on Robersa. He's got some good off-speed pitches. And now that he's in attack mode with his stuff and some rumors that he's increased his velocity a little bit, there's a chance that Sem Robersa could, smuggle his way into a major league start at some point this year. Prospect
I would
12
like to see him snuggle his way into one. Actually, that would be very interesting.
I think it tells you where my mind is here at 9:20 at night on a Friday. Just want to snuggle with my Daniel. Prospect number 12 is Ian Bedell, who is basically marching his way back. The short of the long with Bedell is coming back off an injury. He got himself to over 100 innings at Peoria. Didn't get drafted into Rule 5, thank God for that. Hopefully the Cardinals give him a chance to be aggressive. Fastball and a sinker, both with interesting profiles to go along with the slider and a changeup that are 2, in my opinion, devastating pitches. They're above average that can flash different levels of plus. It's just a matter of putting it all together with a low 90s fastball that in one start when he was pitching in front of his hometown crowd in Iowa, he got up to like 98 miles an hour. So it's in there. It's just a matter of how it all like how it all comes together.
Mhm.
Prospect number 11. I can't read my own handwriting. Is Max Rachek, who is a Rajic rather, who is the Cardinals' 2023 Pitcher of the Year. Big curveball by Rajic, big pitchability. Some questions about his fastball shape and size. But he's just a good pitcher. More than likely, he finds his way down this list. Probably tumbles a little bit in 2024. Double A is going to be a tough assignment for him, although he got a little taste of it in the playoffs last year, the Double A playoffs last year, which was a really cool thing. Big curveball. His curveball is really his signature pitch. So I'm anxious to see how far he can particularly ride that with the pitchability he has. 10 is Jimmy Crooks, the second catcher. Terrible first half of the year, amazing second half of the year. Sometimes his catching is uneven. Sometimes he goes swiping at pitches low in the dirt too. Sometimes he relies on his glove a little bit more than his lateral movement. But he's a rallier. He's definitely a great teammate and a great model teammate. Love Jimmy Crooks, big left-handed bat from the catcher too, which is a really interesting profile. 9 is Chase Davis. Everybody asked me if Chase Davis is a bust. I don't understand it. He's been in the organization for 4 minutes, and he's an outfielder from Arizona who the Cardinals drafted in the first round last year. And I love Chase Davis. He is a charismatic young man with a ton of energy and a desire to be great. Problem is, he reverted back once he made his organizational debut with Palm Beach. He reverted back to his underclassmen tendencies at Arizona. Where he was swinging like a maniac at nearly everything and causing him to change his approach at the plate. So it's just a matter of him reining that in, which I'm sure he has, get those nerves out. And I think there's a world where we'll see Chase Davis make a Double A debut at some point this year. I think I'm probably being a little aggressive, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about Chase Davis on a similar path to what Victor Scott was on last year. So, spend most of the year at Peoria, and then find his way to Double A with success. Prospect 8 is Leonardo Bernal, catcher. Look, Bernal is a fascinating guy. He's tough to talk about because he's kind of his own thing. He's young. He's not the prospect that Ivan Herrera was, but he has a potential to be some version of Ivan Herrera. There's some defensive things that he still needs to work out because he's a big kid with a big body, but he has good lateral motion. He has a strong arm, and he has a bat from both sides of the plate that flash potential impact. So switch hitting catcher is a lot to bank on, and he has a ton of potential in that bat. So he's just fascinating. And of course, prospect number 7 is Gordon Graceffo. I mentioned today that I love watching a healthy Gordon Graceffo pitch. He's worked on his mechanics, and it seems like just from early returns and what I'm hearing that young man has maybe worked out some of the tipping issues he has. Now his fastball, from a metric standpoint, is still very pedestrian. But if his slider stays major league ready, as it is right now, it's his best offering, and it's definitely a major league pitch. And his curveball can continue to flash in limited usage. Its ability to keep hitters off of it, and that changeup, which he cuts sometimes, if that changeup can continue to keep hitters off of it, then he's a major league starter, mid back end starter. So even though Gordon Graceffo had an injury-plagued, down 2023 season that was not reflective of his 2022 success, there's still a major league starter in Gordon Graceffo. And honestly, he has a similar attacking mind frame to what Lance Lynn has. And I'm very hopeful that the Cardinals have recognized this and have paired them up together, because I think the two of them can learn a lot from each other. I tweeted about it very goofy, but it's funny to me because Adam Kloffenstein has the stuff that's most like Lance Lynn's, where it's like, all right, he throws basically one pitch, but at varying speeds and that break a little bit different. And then Gordon Graceffo is like the mentality of Lynn on the mound. Like, I'm going to attack you. I'm going to murder you. And once I've murdered you, I'm going to celebrate it. And like when Lynn got away from the Cardinals, all the gifs and video that you'd see of him is that was him on the mound. So my hope is that those two kind of paired up with Lance Lynn, and that likewise the other two additions, Sem Robersa and why am I blanking? Um, and Takoa Roby in a lot of ways, because Roby's kind of like low key, and also Michael McGreevy, like they're the perfect guys to like match up with Kyle Gibson. Uh,
Mhm.
Roby's got higher octane. That he has a potential to be a more effective long term version of Kyle Gibson, but like their personalities all kind of jive with Gibson, and then McGreevy and Robersa, they have a repertoire that I think in pitchability and pitch usage with inferior stuff, although Roberta's stuff is better than McGreevy's, that I think could really benefit from some teaching from Kyle Gibson.
And then number 6.
Oh, Juan Bin Cho.
Yeah.
Juan Bin Cho is fascinating because this is me projecting, which is something I very rarely do on the list, and why I'm not very good at this is with Cho, I'm projecting what I think he's going to be, which is unique. And the reason is he's not, his outfield's really weird, right? Watching him play the outfield is fascinating because he's fast and he shows off his foot speed. But it's kind of an adventure out there for somebody as fast as he is, who makes as many plays as he does. It's just that he takes the long way around to make plays frequently. And his arm is kind of weird. It's very inconsistent. Sometimes it looks strong, sometimes it looks weak. Sometimes it's on a line, sometimes it's loopy. Sometimes he throws it to the right base, sometimes he doesn't. He's a very inconsistent fielder. I'm banking that with one additional year stateside, one additional offseason, that he has taken a step to shore up some of those inconsistencies in the outfield. The other thing with Cho is that while I love his approach at the plate and I love his speed, I love the fact that he can drop a bunt here and there, although he's not like great at it, uh, that he can use the entire field, that he hits the ball on a line, that he hits the ball on the line hard. He hasn't gotten into his in-game power. And I personally don't think he's ever going to be like a 25 or 30 home run guy. I don't think that's realistic. 20 might be here and there. But I think more than likely, he's like the next generation Lars Nootbaar is what I think. It's just a matter of putting it all together, making it consistent. And we all know how valuable a healthy Lars Nootbaar is, not only from like a weighted runs created standpoint or a WAR standpoint, uh, from like a team build standpoint, because of all the things that he can kind of do when he's really on. So what I'm banking on here in a lot of ways is that 20-year-old Juan Bin Cho takes those steps to get himself one step closer to being a Lars Nootbaar type left-handed swinger in the box, and develop into a Lars Nootbaar type outfielder too. Because there was a time when Lars Nootbaar was a clunky outfielder who didn't really look like he had a position out there. Might have been marooned out and left, and he accessed it all. And we all know what Lars Nootbaar is capable of being now. So that's show is going to be fascinating, because if he does stay exactly how he is, I probably would have moved him down between like Chase Davis and Jimmy Crooks more than likely. But I'm banking, because I know how hard that kid worked this offseason, and all of his potential, that he's going to take the next step.
He also has a great dog, so that kind of boops him up a little bit too. So
I tried my hardest to not say that. I only respect people with dogs and cats and animals.
narrows it down. All right, top 5. Again, these are people that everybody knows. I think it's a little bit surprising, not surprising, I guess, but interesting that Cooper Jerpy made number 2 on your list instead of maybe a little bit farther down. But Victor Scott second, Thomas Sagasi, hence Jerpy, Roby. This top 5 are guys that are gonna, well, maybe be there this year, probably really knocking on the door next year. What do you see out of them?
It's a fun and diverse group, right? Like, even there's only 2 overlaps here. It's the 2 righties, Takoa Roby and Tink Hence, and they're not really all alike. They both can get it in the high 90s, but the way that they do everything else is a little different. Roby's more breaking pitch, Hence is more off-speed pitch. Is more changeup with a breaking pitch that's coming along. And Roby's got a couple of big breakers, with with a big curveball and a slider that's coming along that he's really, really bullish about. Um, the Victor Scott 2 Thomas Sajaci thing, I didn't know what to do there. That my answer to you here is I don't know what to do there. And I've had a lot of people ask me about prospects, the ranking of prospects 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the truth is, I mean, really, they could be in any order. From my vantage point, those 5 could be in any order. And saying one over the other is really just splitting hairs on personal preference and what I like. But I do think that they are the clear-cut top 5 in the organization, and it's just a matter of how their season goes. That will dictate which one obviously is more effective and has earned a spot higher on the list. But everybody knows Victor Scott II. It's at the point now where there's so much hype around Victor Scott II that I almost don't even need to write about him or talk about him.
Right.
And we only ever do that with guys who have made their major league debut and who have already had everybody write about them and talk about them. And that's fascinating to me because I don't think the Cardinals have had a prospect as hyped. Even Jordan Walker and even Mason Wynn and even Dylan Carlson than Victor Scott in a lot of ways. And that has me worried. I think he can live up to the hype, and I'd bet on it if I had to, but I just don't think it's fair to him in a lot of ways. And I think that maybe that's why he's not higher up on my list, even though the 5th spot is still a high list. Like, he's a really talented young man, and he's smart, and he's old school in a lot of his work ethic and his mentality and the way that he goes about his business. Like, he's definitely old school, like there, if you want to talk about like a clubhouse, like this is an old school guy. He's an old school clubhouse type guy. It doesn't mean he's not fun loving or anything like that. He definitely is. And, every teammate he's ever had loves him. I just think that there's still some parts of his game that need development. I think that, I'm anxious to see how the power comes along. We saw him kind of struggle with his approach and change his approach at AA. I'm anxious to see if that was just a comfort thing and he's going to get back to what we saw at Peoria, or if it was compromising, trying to get to a little bit more power and compromising his approach a little bit. I don't really invest much in the Arizona Fall League, so I'm going to stay away from that. And it's I want to see him kind of get into his power. And I know that they told him to work on his swing, the speed of his swing, to make his swing faster and quicker, thus more powerful. And I think that that's gonna pay off for him. But I still am concerned about like him hitting for extra bases. And I know that that's the old thing that like, hey, but when he's as fast as he is, all he's got to do is get a single and turn a single into a double and a double into a triple. But I still think stealing bases is pretty hard. And it's harder at the major league level than it is at the minor league level. That doesn't mean he won't steal 94 bases eventually, or 70 bases, or 80 bases, or 50 bases. It's really hard still to do, even with the rule changes. It's easier now than it's been in past, but I just, even when he hits the ball hard, which is awesome, I want to see him continue to hit the ball on a line, continue to use the left field, like as a lefty, to use left field as much as possible. And of course, the one variable with Victor Scott II is his ability to bunt for a base hit. I know earlier in the week he bunted and popped right up, and I can't even think of a time this year that he did that. That's the first time I think I've ever seen him do that. So probably just some spring nerves there. I think that's part of the reason why he struggled at the plate early in spring, which means nothing at all. Just some nerves, trying to show what he's capable of, trying to earn the starting center fielder job. But there's other little things about his game too, and it's also what makes him special, or some of like, not my areas of concern. That's not fair because I'm not concerned about it because of how special he is. But like, just to compare him to like Harrison Bader, there are plays where on a line to center, Harrison Bader would be camped underneath. And Victor Scott might get eaten by those plays, but then have the athleticism and the speed to make up for them. Not to diminish his instinct, because his instincts are really good, but there's still some read issues that he has. And they're not really issues because his speed and athleticism make up for it. It's just that I would like to see him just find a way to get into a little bit better positioning here and there. Again, that is nitpicking to the finest, but it's just those little things that still need a little bit of refinement that I have no concern about in the long term, his ability to do it at the major league level. It's just that as we get into 2024, it just doesn't seem fair to him. Again, me trying to be protective of people that I've never met. It doesn't seem fair to him to put him in a position where you're asking him to contribute at the major league level, even if he has 3 skills in defense, speed and base running that are major league ready right now. Yeah.
There's something about, and probably because it is so rare, right? That speed gets that extra attention because it's a different game. It's a little bit of a throwback, especially in St. Louis, right? I mean, speed's always going to have a place in St. Louis, but you feel like, not that Victor Scott couldn't have played in the '80s at all. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think he would have been like it's hyped. Like when Vince Coleman has come out, Coleman is not, granted, different market, different ways we're looking at the minors and stuff like that, but I still don't think it would have stood out as much, and so it wouldn't have the hype. But nowadays, you don't have that, so he gets that extra attention because of this. And then, once you get that attention, people expect a lot out of you. So, yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. I know a lot of people are, oh, he needs to, he's going to make a push for the. I just don't see him. I mean, even with a good year, I don't know if he's even a September call up. I think that's the best case scenario for him and for the team.
Yeah, we're talking about spring. All of your points are valid, and it's even more interesting if you want to flip that on its head. Because if he was around in the '80s and the speed wouldn't have mattered, he also wouldn't have had the push to hit the ball harder, right? It would have been just don't swing and miss,
Right.
and which would have allowed him to capitalize on his bunting because he probably would bunt like 20% more than he does now. But yeah, that's a great point. Just think about spring training and what we talked about earlier with Mason Wynn. We're only 1 week into spring games. They do not matter at all. Not one of these games has mattered even just a little bit, other than that no one's gotten hurt. The only person who got hurt there was Matt Carpenter, and we were all hoping it was worse than what it was. Is that a year ago? And I've been the one who's been like, hey, at the best case scenario, let's put Vic Scott on the Mason Wynn timeline. And just 1 year ago, Mason Wynn was lighting spring on fire. Not just in the field or on the bases, he at the plate. And Vic isn't there. Vic isn't there. So just have a little bit of context there. And again, every spring is built differently, and spring stats don't really matter. But we are seeing Victor be pretty aggressive at the plate right now, and I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing for him. Again, who am I to say one way or the other? That kid knows more about baseball than I could ever imagine. He knows more about hitting than I could ever even dream of. But he's at his best when he's relaxed, and I don't know if he's relaxed right now or what's going on, but he just seems tense, and because of that, it might take him a little bit longer to get to what he's capable of.
Maybe he just hasn't been around all that leadership yet, and maybe that's the thing. So
that's right. I wonder how his golf swing was today.
I don't know. He may have run it out there faster than he hit it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah. So this overall group, you like it? I mean, does it feel good to you?
Not to continue to put too much pressure on three arms. It is a solid group that if those three at the top, Cooper Jerpy, Takoa Roby, and Tink Hence, take the next step in their development, it becomes a top 10, potentially top 5 group. It has that potential. Right now, it's probably a 15 to 20 group with the potential to be, again, that top, potentially top 5 if a lot of these guys make the step, of course, but a top 10, top 8 to 11 type group. So, you hate to put that much pressure on that 3, and then with Graceffo and Bedell as like the back 2 of the 5, but I really think the health of the organization, as terrible as that is, the long-term sustainable success really comes down to those 3 arms. And again, a chance to talk about Jerpy for a second. Like I'm not going to back off of how I feel about Cooper Jerpy just because he was hurt last year and because he let up a lot of home runs to righties, even though that was it. It was just 8 home runs and a couple doubles and nothing else. If his velocity is in the low 90s, it doesn't even need to be up to the mid 90s. It's not like Matthew Liberatore where it has to be mid or high. with his angle, if he can stay healthy, his fastball only needs to be like 91 to 93 to be effective, even to righties, as long as they're letting him use it inside and as long as he's commanding it inside on righties, which is what he wasn't doing at first in Peoria. It took him a while to get his mechanics right. And when he did, he hurt his arm. He felt those bone spurs and they had to go get those bone spurs out of his arm. But he's so unique and he's so individual. And there are no one else. There's very few people like him. And his pitches are so hard to quantify that when you're that unique, and even when you didn't have a quote unquote successful season and you still were really good, that tells me that there's no reason to be daubered down on him just yet. It's the unique aspects of his success, of his ability to have success are there, and it's just a matter of him getting to it all with health, and really with Roby and Hentz and Jerpy, with the health questions that they've all had, all three of them have had early into their minor league careers, their professional organized baseball careers. That is the key: staying healthy and being effective. Because more than likely, if you're playing the odds, one of these guys is going to be a major league starter, probably back end starter. One of them is going to be a reliever, and the other one is going to get hurt and not ever reach their potential. So you hope that this group of three can defy that, and that Bedell and Graceffo and Robersa in particular can supplement that in some way or the other. But I really think that the long-term health of this organization, the long-term success from a draft and develop standpoint, really falls on those three arms, because I think they're deep enough at the major league level with their position players that it, and at the higher levels of the minor leagues, that's not even like, even if Cho takes a huge step forward, or Vic Scott becomes an all-star outfielder, or Thomas Sajaci becomes Matt Carpenter, then I don't think it matters as much as those three arms from a sustainable model success of a draft and development team.
All right. Well, again, that's something to look forward to, something to watch this summer, and to keep track of, as it may impact not only what happens, for those guys, but what the Cardinals do as an organization going forward. Before we wrap it up, and we've been at this an hour and a half, so we'll table our Star Wars discussion, because that could take another hour and a half. Is there anything, any last thoughts you have before we finish it up?
No, we probably should break this thing into two podcasts is what we should do. I probably shouldn't have ranted on about all of the prospects and just divided it up into small prospect chats like we talked about before this started.
Well, give people something to do this week, so
yeah,
it's fine. So, and I think it's good stuff. And you get this out there, and then, as I said, as we go through the season, we'll check back in here and there and see how these guys are doing, and if anything has changed on them. So, plus there's kind of an important draft this year. So,
oh boy,
yeah. All right. Well, it's been a lot of fun to have Kyle on here, and if you're still with us, I appreciate it. I'm also fairly impressed, but you're here because of Kyle, so I understand that as well. Next week, we'll be out on Thursday. We're going to have Will Leach join us. So we're looking forward to that. Stick around. I've got a little bit of a talk with Alan about the Tulsa Hell Drillers, but until next time, for Kyle, I'm Daniel. Good night.
They just won't go away.
All right, we're here for another week talking about Tulsa Hell baseball with the coach, Alan Medlock, who is not only the coach, but is also teacher of the year at Tulsa Hell. Congratulations, Alan. That's a pretty good honor for you.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. No, it kind of surprised me as well. I was runner-up last year, and I was kind of blown away by that. But this year they did the vote, and it's voted through parents of your students and the community, and some other stuff, and some people in the building. And I got a call from the district out of nowhere, and they asked, "Hey, you won this, you know what I mean? Congratulations." I was like, "That's awesome." They just sent me a questionnaire, and I filled it out, and I even kind of took a little bit of time to do it just because of being busy. Put it in, made it to the website, and I was pretty low key about it, but the kids found it, and it got out pretty quick.
Yeah, it was one of your students sharing it on Twitter. That's
how we
found out. But I mean, hey, runner up in your second year, you win it in your third year. I mean, you got a dynasty going on here.
Hey, I know it. Well, yeah, it's only down here from here is what I'm worried about.
Maybe so. Well, what hopefully isn't downhill is the rest of the season, and we've gotten another week under your belts. How many games did you play this week, and how'd they turn out?
We played 2 scrimmages this week. We had we went to Owasso, which is probably the best team in the state, one of the best in the country, and we played them, and it was pretty rough. But they have a beautiful ballpark, all turf, really nice facility. Pretty much, It's I mean they're similar, but it's the jewel around here as far as high school goes. I mean, let's put it. I'll tell you this: you scrimmage on a Saturday with them, and you're one of 3 games. One of those type of situations because everybody uses the ballpark. So we went out there and we competed, but the moment got a little big for us, and they kind of ran away with it. But we got all of our pitching in and lengthened the game that we wanted to. And then we turned around and we played last night. We played another one of the Tulsa public schools, and we played extremely well. And we end up winning that one. We had a senior, Elijah Wells, struck out 10 in his 4 innings yesterday. It was really, really effective. And that was a name. We talked last week of some of the arms that I'm going to have. He was probably 3rd or 4th on my list of guys that I thought would make starting appearances this year and make a difference. But no, I mean, he dominated them yesterday. He's a senior. This is his 3rd year with me. He'll be our everyday center fielder when he's not on the mound. He hits 3rd in the lineup for us, and he was one spot shy of securing a berth in the state wrestling tournament. Just a really good athlete, really good kid, and he'll be highly successful outside of school, and he means the world to a place like Tulsa Hale.
I imagine. If you're putting him in that 3 spot, then I know that he's hitting you pretty well for you.
Sure. I the way that I make out the lineup a lot has a lot to do with, effectiveness. Yes, but it's almost like a badge, almost like your captainship. Guys that mean a lot to us that fit the mold, that can that's going to come up there and give you a good at bat every day, and wears the name on the front of their chest well, and he fits that mold really, really well.
How do you balance that with? I mean, it's pretty easy early in the year. Yeah, you want to put those guys out there, and you can do it in that kind of lineup. But as the year gets on, how do you balance that kind of honorific type of with what might actually be happening or what you actually need that day?
Sure. Well, I'll give you an example. Last year, I did the same thing, and it was our senior center fielder who he had just a little bit more experience than everybody else. Really, really good defensively, and he could swing it. I put him in the 3 spot, and we let them roll with it for probably our first 7 to 8 games. And we have a stat service that I'll check every week, and I do it game to game. We have a stats meeting after the games. We'll probably do it after series games, but long story short, I have a service that it's an online service where you pay for it. We keep all of our book on an iPad now, and it does everything for you. So yeah, we did that, and ultimately I realized, I was like, man, some of my on base guys are not the most on basey, but they do swing the bat a little bit. And I made a flip last year to where I took him from 3rd to 1st and made some other changes, one of those deals, and our offense seemed to click a little bit at that point. This year I changed the way that I do things a lot. I looked at last year's stats. I looked at our summer stats, and I was really heavy on base percentage wise. I was like, let's see these guys that can get on, that can walk, that can score the most runs, to see if that would help us out. And then I would do a left-right balance a little bit. Well, in high school this year, what I realized is some of the guys that have the best idea of the strike zone are also those guys that are going to swing early. So what I changed my mindset on is I wanted our best hitters to hit as many times as possible. So I stacked the front of our lineup 1, 2, 3, and 4 really heavy. And then I have a 5-hole who's a senior who is probably overall our best hitter, but he's also our big first baseman who's probably one of our lower level runners. So what I like to do is put 4 ahead of him that can motor and hit a little bit, let Joe hit behind them, and then kind of stack it up from there as well, and kind of do a lineup that way. Then do kind of a double lead off with one of my younger kids that starts at second base for us. And it seems to be going really well. Like our leadoff hitter yesterday, it's Atticus, the one that posts a lot of stuff on social media. He's a lefty. He's our lefty shortstop. He's the leader of our infield, and I want kids to play like he plays. Like he doesn't take any plays off. He never loafs down the line, and he wants to turn a single into a double. He's looking to steal right away. We bunt and run with him a lot. And that's the first at bat I want to see. I want the opposing team to see and our dugout to see that he's going to take a hard 90 every time. Well, yesterday he was 3 for 4, but every at bat he went full count. Mm-hmm. So those are big wins for us. And behind him we have one of our big horses, Levin Whaler, who he'll start our opener. He'll be our one, if not de facto 1A on the bump. Catches a little bit. He'll play a little bit of everywhere, but he goes behind it and he swings the bat. So that's kind of how we put it together. I don't see many changes, maybe to the middle of the lineup. Ultimately, if we see some slumps or whatnot, or maybe guys pushing their way into the lineup. But as far as how we compose it, I'm pretty happy with where we are right now.
You know how you're hitting me when you start talking about a service for the stats.
Well, I knew that you had offered before, and I thought about sending you our book a couple times, but no, we pay an upcharge on our Game Changer, and it breaks everything down for you.
Yeah,
and it's really good service. I trust me, they're not paying me to say it. I mean, it's the way to go. And if their camera wasn't so expensive, I would get it and I would broadcast games on Twitter.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool too. No, that's what I did for our baseball team.
Yeah.
When I was a senior and junior and senior, and doing the book by hand, and before I even knew anything about spreadsheets, because they're really, as we date ourselves,
Sure.
Excel wasn't really around. It was the, Lotus. No, it wasn't Lotus 1-2-3. I don't think it's Quattro Pro. I think I had, and all that kind of stuff. So we were doing by hand and having, and trying to learn. I wonder. I would love to see some stuff with the new stats.
Oh man,
so having a service like that's got to be pretty impressive.
No, and it's pitch to pitch. I mean, I could find I can find out just about anything. It's and what's really nice about it is basketball and football have both been able to record and do their huddle, and that's the service that they use, and it'll run stats for you and save your games. Well, baseball, you just didn't have that luxury a lot, and but now we're catching up, and I get asked for spray charts and like that from other schools all the time. The coaches you're close with will ask a lot of the questions, and I even had one, and just out of a scrimmage yesterday, I asked about some pitching for an opposing team, and coach was glad to send it to me, and I was like, this is stuff that we just didn't have.
Yeah, it's incredible steps that they've made when that kind of stuff can filter down, because you see it's the big leagues, but eventually it makes it all the way down to high school, or I don't know, I bet there's some t-ball teams that have got that kind of stuff going on.
I'm sure that's it was funny. I was up early this morning. I was watching the rebroadcast of Mets and who were they? Oh, Mets Marlins this morning. And I was sipping coffee and catching up on some emails and stuff like that. And they were talking about, it was Ron Darling had made a comment about it being a little league play, and something about, hit expectancy, type deal when the ball was hit real hard and Jose Iglesias misplayed it. And it was not, half inning later where, the lead guy comes back on and says, well, that's what it would have been due to the charts or whatnot. And then somebody says, and I'd like to see a little league game. Someone asked those questions if that happened. And he goes, yes, it does happen at 10 and under games. That's exactly how far we made it.
Yeah, it's incredible how things are different than they used to be. So you're getting scrimmages out. Do you have any more, or is it?
Nope.
Or is it?
No, wait.
Ready
we
to roll
got the real deal against our top rival on Friday afternoon.
Wow.
It's here.
All right.
Yeah, we start with Tulsa Will Rogers on Saturday. Then we turn around, or on Friday. Then we turn around and have a Saturday doubleheader at noon and 2 against Summit Christian here in town. We're off Sunday, and then we start district play Monday and Tuesday.
My goodness, that's
it's a lot of games, and I stacked it up. I mean, you're allowed 37, and I'm around 35 right now.
Wow. Well, we look forward to talking about it then next week. Is there anything out of this last week, out of these scrimmages that we haven't touched on that you want to kind of highlight?
Yeah, I think we're good for right now. I mean, we had the kids swing the bat pretty well. I'll have some game by game updates, and I'll have our stats available next week. But the kids played well, and like I told our admin today, I think we're in a really good spot. It was one of those where we knew that Elijah would fill up the strike zone, and we have a freshman that followed him up that did the same thing. And if we're throwing strikes, if we win the battle of free bases, which is our goal every day, we're going to be a lot better than people think.
There you go. There you go. Well, look forward to it. Maybe, like we said, you and I talked about it. We may start talking about a player of the week when the games start. So maybe we'll look forward to that next week as well.
I'll have my first one next week. We'll have 5 games under our belt by the time we meet on Wednesday.
So somebody will make a standout impression.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll talk about that then. So, all right. We'll look forward to it next week.
All right, buddy. I appreciate you.
He hits it in the air to left field. Back is Chavez. At the wall. This ball is gone. 2-run home run, Yadier Molina. And St. Louis takes a 3-1 ninth inning Game 7 lead.